Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Public Forum of Council. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet here today and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. We welcome our community members that have joined us via webcast. I think we have one on there, and also in the public gallery for the 11th October 2022 Central Coast Public Forum. So I now declare that public forum open. We're holding this public forum today in order to hear from community members who have registered to speak on items before the council meeting tonight. I ask that the community members be listened to in silence and with respect. Where the speakers are commenting on a document proposed to be exhibited for community submissions, I do remind you that you must also make your submissions separately once the exhibition opens. Also want to remind speakers, indeed everybody here, that this forum is being webcast. This means your image and what you say is broadcast live to the community and is also recorded. So clearly, just be careful about how you couch things. Please make sure your mobiles and so on off, and would ask people to remain seated. So moving on to conflicts of interest. I don't believe any of the staff here have any conflicts of interest. Again, for speakers, all the speakers, I remind you, those who have registered to speak, and we have 6 speakers tonight, your presentation is being live streamed and recorded, and you will have 3 minutes. You will get a sort of a wake-up call as to when you're getting near the end of your time, and I will ask you to finish up pretty much straight after time. I leave a little bit of latitude, so just to finish up, but please make sure you try and finish in the allotted 3 minutes, because we have quite a number tonight. So, without further ado, I'll move to the first speaker, and we deal with speakers in the order which the items appear on the council agenda. So, the first speaker is Matthew Wales, who's attending via Teams online. So, hopefully, Matthew, for item 2.1, you can come in now. Hopefully, the technology works.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yep, loud and clear. That's great.
Okay, thank you. In the 25 years that I've been president of the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, I'm honestly struggling to recall another time when I've been as disappointed over an interaction with council or with a council report as I am tonight. All the business community on the peninsula want is the right to install the Australian flag banners leading up to Australia Day on the light poles in West Street and Mine Beach, as we've done in years past. A very simple request, you might think, but sadly, this is not to be. Over recent years, our business community has heard just about every excuse under the sun why Australian flag banners cannot be installed on the light pole brackets for which they were specifically designed. We were told that our original Australian flag banners, which the Chamber paid for and were kept at the Rural Depot, had been lost, only to find out later they'd in actual fact been thrown away. We then offered to pay for new banners and were told that they were too costly to install and that council did not have the manpower, even though council regularly rotated banners on the light poles for other events and special occasions. We were then told that the Australian flag banners did not meet the federal government protocols for flying the Australian flag, when in fact they do comply with those protocols, including being illuminated at night. Council then claimed that flying the Australian flag banners might offend some people, even though we were not told of those people who might be offended. And this now brings us tonight to the Council's business paper, where yet we find another excuse has surfaced. The report proceeds to tell us that Ausgrid, as asset owner of the street lighting that support the banner hanging infrastructure, has confirmed that they do not support the flying of national flags on their assets. It goes on to say that Ausgrid fully support the policy position proposed by Council, which is consistent with their own guidelines. Now, when I read this, I couldn't believe that an organisation such as Ausgrid, which is half owned by the New South Wales taxpayers, would make such a statement. So I did a bit of checking and found that their guidelines make no such statement and at no point preclude the installation of Australian flag banners on their infrastructure. Just to be sure, I contacted Ausgrid, who similarly could not find any such references. They further provided the Chamber of Commerce with a letter stating that Ausgrid does not determine what banners should be hung from its infrastructure and do not stipulate the terms of the usage other than for public safety and the avoidance of advertising products. Clearly, I believe the council report is incorrect. Ausgrid do not make these decisions, and nor does Ausgrid's policies or guidelines approve the installation of the Australian flag banners. For this reason alone, I suggest that the matter be deferred and the report be reconsidered. I cannot believe that we're even having an argument over the right as proud Australians to fly our national flag on the light poles, leading up to and including Australia Day, as we have successfully done in the past. At a time when council should be focusing on the financial health of the business, it's bitterly disappointing to the business community that an inordinate amount of resources have been thrown at this flawed policy. I respectfully, Mr Hart, request that this matter be deferred and the council enter into discussions with the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce with a view to allow the Australian flag banners to be installed on the light poles in accordance with the state and federal government protocols. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Wales. We now have Frank Robertson from Ausgrid speaking on item 2.1.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hart. Good to go?
Just move a little closer to the mic, or move the mic towards you.
There you go.
Yeah,
Is that working? So Ausgrid is asking the council to note a clarification to the council paper. Ausgrid's submission was supportive, stating that the council's proposed policy was aligned with Ausgrid's policies and standards. To clarify, Ausgrid's policy on the matter of banners attached to its infrastructure is to delegate decision-making responsibility about what is appropriate in the public domain to the council as the community's representatives. Ausgrid's relevant standard, NS 183, does not stipulate the terms of hanging banners on poles beyond the requirement for public safety, causing no risk to the electricity network and avoidance of advertising of products, commercial services, or any form of political promotion. We did not identify any safety risks, advertising, or political promotion in this proposed policy. The paper as it stands states that Ausgrid, as the asset owner of the street lighting that supports the banner hanging infrastructure, have confirmed they do not support the flying of national flags on their asset. This is not entirely correct. Rather, Ausgrid trusts that council will consult the community on its decisions, and we support the council to make its own policies on this matter. Ausgrid does not prohibit flying flags on its infrastructure, and council should not make a decision based on that assumption.
Thank you. We now move on to a couple of speakers for item 2.3, which is the 6 cities discussion paper. And first up, we have Martin Stevenson. Martin, if you'd like to move to the mic and make sure the mic's nice and close to you.
Thank you. In regard to 2.3, I'd just like to say our council was suspended for gross financial mismanagement and an unelected administrator was installed. Elected councillors are there to represent our community. All levels of government these days seem to have forgotten that they work for the people and should therefore act accordingly and stop dictating to us what we want. They need to listen to the local community and what we want and not what they've decided they want for us. At every turn, we're being pushed into situations by government and bureaucrats without any consultation whatsoever. One of the major reasons many people moved to the Central Coast over the last 20 plus years has been its great relaxed atmosphere and community spirit. This six city region will destroy the sense of community we've always had. We will be consumed by Sydney. We will there surely lose our own identity, and it's just another blatant government overreach, and we've had enough. This desperate push to centralise power will rob our local community of our voice. Issues specific to the Central Coast will be ignored. We will need our local government to stay local and be accountable to local people in the local community. So that's on that, and I'd just like to back up old mate over here about the flag. Anyone that says we can't fly an Australian flag in this country should hang their head in shame. My uncle died for this country under that flag, as many other people have, and it's just an abomination that can even be considered. So whoever thought that up, please hang your head in shame.
Thank you. Okay, we have a second speaker on item 2.3, which is Simon Butler. Welcome, Simon.
Good evening. I'd like to talk about the Six Cities Regional Discussion Paper. More broadly, my statement's already out, but I'll say it quickly. With such an important issue regarding the Central Coast becoming a smart city, what long-term implications for the ratepayers of the Central Coast? I have a few questions. Why is there not a detailed list of what a smart city involves? And I reference that with there's so many different sub-papers and other papers where it doesn't actually, there's no one, here it is, this is what you're getting list. I would like to know, what are the implications beyond the fast train? What else is involved in a smart city? What privacy implications have been considered? And I think this is really vital part to our whole lives, to our children's lives, that if we end up becoming a monitored society, by default, one cut at a time, our whole well-being diminishes and we don't see it. And I see this in government repeatedly, where you don't see the change all at once. And the more you research these things, the more you see these things. So I would really hope that the council would consider privacy as a really important part of a smart city. Okay. So why is there not broader community consultation process? I'm concerned that this could be modelled on what is currently happening overseas, where citizens are monitored and all actions recorded. This becomes the basis of a de facto social credit system. I have serious doubts about the safety and efficacy of a smart city privacy and data retention and storage being used by other agencies without our consent. As an example, the police were using the data from QR code check-ins to monitor people during the recent pandemic. What safety provisions for our privacy have you considered before agreeing to sign the Central Coast up to becoming a smart city? Why are we not allowed to have representation of councillors on the Central Coast until 2024, another 2 years? How are decisions that affect our community, many with long-term implications, being decided by one person, an administrator? This administrator will leave his current role behind newly elected councillors who were not responsible during your time as an administrator. So what I'm basically getting at here is, it's great that you do the job that you do, trying to repair the damage that was done from the previous administration. But if you leave behind where we've just signed up to some blanket thing from the government, which I've got to be honest with you, there's not a lot of trust in government, broadly speaking. And that's what I would hope you would consider going forward, that we retain our privacy, our dignity, and that you just don't give some blanket monitoring system by not even knowing what you're doing. The local member thinks we're getting a fast train. A fast train. We've been talking about a fast train for decades. That's, you say yes to a fast train, but oh, by the way, everywhere you go, you get photographed and, thank you, sir.
Thank you. And then we have two speakers on item 2.4, which is the Wamberal Beach Terminal Protection Structure. And the first one is Hugh Nathan. Welcome back again. So I know you've been here a couple of times before.
Thank you. Thanks, Council and Administrator. So I'm here today to represent not just Wamberal Beach Save Our Sand and its 4,000 members, but the wider Wamberal community, the Central Coast ratepayers and those coastal residents concerned around Australia about the erosion issue at Wamberal. So I'm standing here tonight, sitting actually, demanding that as Administrator you do not support the Council recommendations with regards to the seawall at Wamberal. So our group have made it abundantly clear that community experts and physical evidence all suggest that a seawall, especially through the DA system, is not the right way to go for Wamberal. It's not the right option. So I'll outline a couple of reasons, and that's the first reason is that the state government appointed administrator should not make the decision, and it should be delayed until a representative councillor body is elected, because essentially community don't get a say about this entire issue. The second is that the decision should also be delayed until the new coastal management program. So why make a decision now that's going to affect the beach for hundreds of years when in a few short years it's going to be superseded by a new governing document? The other thing is the CZMP, which is the actual governing document for Wamberal. It's totally misrepresentative of current values. So obviously there's sentiments in the Wamberal community all opposed to the seawall. And we clearly showed that with a protest just a couple of weeks ago, which had over 1,000 attendees. And we had a petition with over 2,000 signatures. We got 4,000 members in our group. So clearly the coastal zone management plan is not actually representative of community values. And the increased awareness around this issue is shown with 240 submissions regarding this document, in which council actually said, and I quote, that there was significant opposition to the wall. So the coastal zone management plan is actually based on 3 community submissions about Wamberal, a meeting at Terrigal Surf Club that had just around 70 participants, and from that meeting they've actually cut and pasted from a 2004 report a pie chart that had 46% of people supporting a seawall. So I was 3 years old when the consultation was done for this beach. So, you know, I clearly care about the beach and I can't even have a say. The fourth reason is that the community experts and are all opposed to the seawall and the DA system. So as I said, we had a massive protest. We've got 4,000 members. And these sentiments are emulated by leading coastal scientists like Professor Andrew Short. And Professor Andrew Short actually said with regards to Wamberal that building a seawall is not a viable option. And the Mars and Jacob cost-benefit analysis, I know it's been completely ignored, indicated that building a revetment wall would leave the beach unusable by 2064 and destroy the beach. And it's also the most costly option according to that report. So I think sand nourishment, planned retreat, alternate options that will help protect houses as well as help maintain the beach should certainly be investigated, and they have not been. And with regards to the actual report, I'd like to bring up some concerns with items 7, Principle 7 and Principle 8. So Principle 7 had regards to the, it said that sand nourishment won't be required at the start due to the location of the wall, and that's completely redundant. The ocean's clearly shown that over time it does what it wants. It doesn't care whether you have it at the start, at the end. A storm could happen in 2 weeks' time that's going to destroy the beach again. So to say that, you know, sand nourishment isn't necessary at the start because of the location, it's just not true. And point 8 outlines the requirements for funding sand nourishment. But again, this issue's pretty redundant when there is actually no criteria at the start that says that homeowners need to have sand nourishment before the wall goes in. So my suggestion first is that this not be accepted tonight, be deferred and wait until a democratically elected council, or if it is accepted, include important criteria such as, you know, sand nourishment must be there from the start and a sustainable source must be found before it's actually implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker we have tonight is Lisa Kolonak. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator and others. My name is Lisa Kolonak. I've been requested to speak on behalf of the Wamberal Protection Association, who represent the Wamberal beachfront landowners who are seeking protection. I congratulate the Council on the progress that's been made on this matter. There's been more progress in the last 2 years than there has been in the previous 30, and we commend Council officers, in particular Casey Johnson and Ben Fuller, on the work they've done to progress the guidelines. In brief, the WPA support the adoption of the engineering design requirements, but recommend that Council does not approve items 4, 7 and 8 in the report. We support the engineering design requirements, noting that the guidelines allow some flexibility to allow for practical and technical adjustments to be made. We, with regard to the works being fully funded by each private property owner, the members acknowledge the principle of majority funding coming from the beachfront beneficiaries and the construction of the structure on our own land. But the cost benefit report 2021 and Council's coastal hazard lines referenced in Council's coastal processes study identify that the beneficiaries of coastal protection works extend beyond the beachfront owners. In fact, protecting the infrastructure, houses, sewer, water, electrical, telecommunications behind the houses themselves, and homes and businesses behind the front line. So while we do acknowledge the principal and majority funding, we think that there should be some acknowledgement that some funding may come from government or other sources in the way that we will be paying for it.
Please let people speak.
I believe I made a statement that we acknowledge that the owners should pay the majority. There is precedence in New South Wales for some joint funding, and we believe that should be continued. Item 5, we do agree on the beach access ways being included in the guidelines and suggest that Council join the Joint Owners DA. The WPA has received with regard to item 6, the WPA has received formal communication that DPE have no intention to join the DA or fund the works on lots owned by DPE, as they're in process of transferring the lots to Council. So is Council accepting that transfer? And if they are, then we suggest that Council join the DA or DPE as landowners also participate. The item 7 with regard to sand nourishment, the stage 4 sand nourishment report indicates that zero upfront sand nourishment requirement for the vertical seawall was required, and that the maintenance volumes of sand nourishment recommended are to address natural recession, not the impacts of the coastal protection works. And with regard to item 8, which is in relation to the $100 a lineal metre, we request Council to explain the justification for that calculation and to explain the justification of apportionment of that fee to beachfront owners. Given that sand nourishment is required as a result of natural recession, we don't understand why beachfront owners have been singled out to pay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Just in conclusion, we recommend that Council support the adoption of the engineering design requirements, but reconsider 4, 7 and 8.
Thank you very much. That was our last speaker, so I will now declare the public forum closed, and those who wish can watch the webcast of the council meeting, which will commence at 6:30. Otherwise, you're free to roam around until such time, and we'll see you at 6:30. Thank you.
strategic plan is the community's vision for the Central Coast for the next 10 years. It's called One Central Coast because this is the first plan for the whole of the Central Coast. We are one region, one council and one community. We live in a special place here on the coast, one in which we want all members of our community to feel valued and have access to a range of opportunities to participate in the richness of community life. And every one of us can play a part in bringing this community vision to life.
If people feel part of a community in some way, they'll give without probably even knowing they're doing it.
I wanted to restore this building and get it back to what it was. It was the jewel of the crown, and I wanted to get it back to that. Making a difference. I guess that's what we're really here for.
The smile on the faces when they see these engines and that bus coming around, they just love it.
If you're following what makes you happy and excited and interested, then you're definitely going to live a life that you will be thankful to have lived.
At the end of the day, we just had a good idea. We needed the support of many people to turn that great idea into a sustainable venture. My name's Tim Silverwood. I grew up on the Central Coast. It wasn't until I got a bit older and started travelling around the world I realised that what we had was so special because people don't always treat the environment as well as we do here on the Central Coast. Our programs have focused on going into schools and running events in communities. We also have a huge global online audience. One man cannot solve these big global problems. It's going to take a tribe of people coming together to solve them. It's a really amazing and rewarding journey in spreading this message around the world.
I've always been on the coast and I've loved the coast. About 6 years ago I bought the Chapman building. I got the opportunity, I saw that it was for sale and I stood back on the car park up there and a village central and I looked down and I could just feel this was the place to be. I could just see what the town was. There's always these little niches that are going back and forth and I guess it's an obsession for all of us because we saw what Wyong was like and it's getting it to a place where, we're proud to say, we're from Wyong. Like it's become a real proud place to be.
My name's Chris Wallace. Myself and my wife, we own Community Fire Education and the Fun Engine. We educate the community in a different way. We teach people what to do in case of fire. One of the biggest things is our education bus. What we do, we go out to different fates, festivals, wherever we can go. When we do the bus sometimes, we get 2,000 through that bus. I just enjoy communicating and getting out there and just educating in a different way.
I'm Meredith Gilmore. I've lived on the coast since 2000, originally from Sydney. Chose the coast because it's close to Sydney, but it's got that more laid back kind of thing that I like. I like living in regional areas. I started visual art in my 40s. It's just so different from what I ever thought that I'd ever do, and it is what led me into thinking it would be great to talk to people in the arts on the radio. So I started doing some shows, particularly a program called Coast Arts, which was a new show, and I reached out into the community because I'm an artist as well. And I just felt like there was a lot of scope on the radio to do interviews with artists and poets and writers, and that's been going now for over 7 years.
My name is Shauna O'Brien. I am from the Central Coast of New South Wales on Dark and Young land, and I'm a dancer. As an Indigenous dancer, we're very inspired by the environment and where we come from, all of the trees, the way that they curve around all of the rocks and the sea faces, the beautiful water, the fresh air, and that plays a huge part in the creative process. I was lucky enough to study at NAISA Dance College, which was a super incredible experience, and the facilities, the studios are really beautiful, the staff are incredible, and I feel very privileged to have had that opportunity. Through volunteering, I was able to meet a bunch of really great other young people in the community that are really passionate about helping other people, and that's a way of taking something that I'm very passionate about and sharing that with other people. No matter where I go to work or if I have to spend a lot of time in Sydney, I always come back to the Central Coast because it feels like home and it helps rejuvenate me.
One of the things about the Central Coast I've noticed as well, which is people are so helpful to each other. They collaborate. They are interested in going to each other's exhibitions, not just to see what people are doing, but so that there are people there. And you've got to be competitive, but you don't have to always be competitive with each other.
If you're in a position to make a difference, I guess you're obliged to make that difference, really. Just happy to, give it all I could, and it became, a local icon and a buzzing place to be.
Okay. Well, that worked. Great to see actually a full gallery, I've got to say. Nice to see we have people here. So thank you and welcome. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also want to acknowledge the presence of the Chair and the CEO of Darkinjong, the Land Council, and they are present with us tonight as well, so I acknowledge them. So welcome to the 11th of October 2022 Central Coast Council Ordinary Meeting. I will now declare that meeting open. Just a reminder to everybody, this meeting is being webcast. I remind those participating in the meeting that your image and what you say will be recorded and broadcast live to the public, so please be mindful of this. You should avoid making any statements that might defame or offend, and I note that Council will not be responsible for your actions. Please make sure your phones are off. And also, given the large numbers, it would be helpful if you don't move around too much. I appreciate some people may have to stand, but also please don't move around unnecessarily. I'll now just make some comments and opening comments, and tonight they'll be fairly short because it's a meeting that's pretty close to the last one. During the weather we've got at the moment, I would be encouraging the community to stay safe and alert during the recent wet weather. Thankfully, large areas of the Central Coast have avoided the worst of the severe rain that has lashed other parts of New South Wales. And it was great to see and hear that the people at Spencer and Gunderman were far better prepared this time round. And Robin Downham, when she was talking on the ABC, just noted the difference that it made when people were prepared for some of these type of events. So they had diesel, they had fuel, they had food stored up, and they could last 2 or 3 days. And the shop there was well stocked. So council staff have been on high alert last week with the BIPBOM releasing their weather forecasts, noting those potential impacts that could have come to our region. We have been, and the team here have been continually monitoring the local roads, the waterways, the beaches, the water and sewer systems, with council crews attending to any of these which have been impacted. On Saturday, the 8th of October, Mangrove Creek Dam reached full capacity for the second time in history. Relatively small volumes of water left the dam through the spillway into Mangrove Creek, as it is designed to do once it reaches 100% capacity. We have had comments from people up there that we should let more water out. I just need to remind people that, in fact, the dam is not a flood mitigation vehicle. It is, in fact, a water storage vehicle, which means there is no means to let water out of it other than what spills over the top. There's no gates to open or valves to open, for example. So just with that in mind, having reached that capacity, there is some spill occurring at this time if we get more rain. The Upper Moonee Dam remains at full capacity and continues again to overflow into Moonee Moonee Creek, as it has done since the 6th of July. The volume of overflow has increased with the current rainfall, and Mardi Dam is at 81.2% capacity. So you can see we've got 2 dams that are at 100% capacity, and just with Mangrove Dam itself, that equates to, I think I'm right, Mr. Loder, close to 10 years of water supply for the Central Coast just in that one dam. So you can see right now we are well endowed, and we could probably do without rain in the near and foreseeable future. Of course, that wet weather we are experiencing during this third La Nina event is causing issues for our road network. Mr. Bolgoff here, it's causing him a lot of headaches and heartache, because across our over 2,000 kilometres of road, he's already done something like 73,000 potholes, and that's still continuing. But again, I remind people, you can't fill a pothole with mix in wet weather and expect it to last. The majority of these, or a lot of these, require what's called a heavy patch, where a section of the road is cut out, you put new base down, and then new seal on top. But that requires dry weather and some continuous dry weather spells in order for the crews to be able to do that. So we continue to have to to push against the odds there, but rest assured the teams are out there doing the best they can. So we have included quite a large number of those medium long-term repair works in our capital program, and we've completed something like 28,500 metres of heavy patching in 181 sites already this year. The Australia Day Awards for 2023 nominations are open. I'd just like to remind the community that the nominations are open. They're open until Sunday, the 23rd of October. So if you do know a local person who provides an outstanding contribution to their community or the broader Central Coast region, head to the Council's website to put them in the running. And again, I would remind you, although I would suggest you get in early, but we do, myself and the executive and the CEO, we do remain out the back, just out the back of the doors you've come in, and we put on tea and coffee and some eats. But I would suggest with the numbers here, if you all turn up, we've probably undercatered, so you might want to be first in the queue if you actually do want to get some light refreshments. And just a reminder, those refreshments are actually produced for us by the Salvation Army's cafe just down the road here in Wyong. So we'll now close that particular part of it, and we'll move to item 1.1, which is disclosures of interest. I have no conflicts of interest to declare. I don't believe any of the staff have. So we will now note the resolutions that is shown and pass the resolutions as shown on the screen. Item 1.2, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. As I was the chair of that meeting and I was present, I can confirm that the minutes are a full and accurate record of the meeting, so I will now resolve to adopt the resolution of those minutes that is shown on the screen. Item 1.3, which is a notice of intention to deal with matters in closed session. I now resolve to adopt the resolutions displayed on the screen. We have no matters that will be tabled to deal with in a closed session. I will now move what's called a procedural motion. In recognition of the public interest in certain agenda items, I propose to consider items 2.1 and 2.4 first, and then the balance of the agenda to follow that. So accordingly, I will now move that motion to make that an act by resolving the resolution that is shown on the screen. So we now move to, as a result of that, to item 2.1, which is consideration of submissions and adoption of draft seat banners and flying a flag policy. And in response to an earlier speaker on that, I'm just going to ask the CEO of the Council, Mr. David Farmer, just to respond to those comments made by the speaker in the public forum.
There has been some questions raised about the paper where there's reference to Ausgrid's position in the paper where Council, where the paper indicates that Ausgrid is not supportive of or is supportive of Council's staff's proposition that the banner poles should not be used to hold, to show full Australian flag replicas. And on the 20th of July, and if we could have that slide, on the 20th of July, we received an email from Ausgrid saying Ausgrid supports Council's position that flags are not suitable attachments to Ausgrid assets. And then in August 2022, as part of the public submission process, Ausgrid provided this response that the policy aligns with Ausgrid's policies and standards. Following the when the report...
Please, order. Please, order. Please. If you can't, people can't hold their comments. There's a public forum. If you want to speak, you should have spoken then. Otherwise, please remain silent and have respect for people trying to do things. Otherwise, I have no choice but to close the meeting because we can't carry out a meeting.
So, if I could just please explain. So the paper says that essentially that Ausgrid does not support the Council, the flying of the Australian flag on the banner poles, not the flying of the Australian flag on flag poles, but on the banner poles that we use to promote events. and that is consistent with the information we were provided with by Ausgrid. However, on the 7th of October, after the paper had been published, Ausgrid have changed their position, and it now says it is with the community working with council, not Ausgrid, that should determine what should be hung and whether they should be dressed at all. Just wanted to clarify, the paper, when it was printed, was correctly presented the position of Ausgrid. Ausgrid have changed their position subsequent to the publishing of the paper.
Thank you. I hope that's quite clear to people. I'm now going to ask Ms. Smith to actually just introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. At the council meeting on the 22nd of February.
Could you just speak up? Bring it much closer. No. Jamie, can't hear. We'll get it right.
You can hear me now? Okay,
Speak
thank you.
very closely to it.
My apologies for that. At the council meeting on the 22nd of February 22, an administrator's minute was put forward requesting officers develop a policy position in regards to the flying of the Australian flag. The resolution states that Council's Chief Executive Officer develop a draft Central Coast banner policy for all town centres that encapsulates our diverse community and activities related to each of our town centres. 2, that Council staff place the draft banner policy on exhibition and provide a report back to Council for consideration no later than the July 2022 ordinary meeting. The policy was developed in response to this. Through the development of the draft policy documents, Ausgrid confirmed to Council that flags were not suitable attachments to Ausgrid assets. In July 2022, officers received an email from Ausgrid stating, and I quote, Ausgrid supports Council's position that flags are not suitable attachments to Ausgrid assets. Further correspondence by way of a public submission was received while the draft policies were on exhibition in August. Council received a submission from Ausgrid through Your Voice, Our Coast, acknowledging they had read the documents, understood them, and stated the documents align with Ausgrid's policies and standards. In September, prior to the publication of the Council report, Council confirmed wording and interpretations within the policies with Ausgrid again. Last Friday, Ausgrid issued a statement to Council which is contradictory to their previous position on the matter. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. It's pretty clear to me that Council followed the appropriate due process in putting these policies and guidelines together following that resolution in February earlier in the year to determine what can be displayed on Council assets and on Ausgrid's assets. I note that there has been significant media coverage on this topic today and over the past few days, and must make it really clear that much of this information has been categorically incorrect. It appears the media these days will take what one person says as gospel truth, despite how inflammatory it might be, with no desire to investigate the full story or whether that perspective is founded on truth. Thank you. It is no wonder the world is deteriorating with the rise of this fake news, which you guys will fully understand. As a result of such reporting, Council staff have today faced a barrage of abuse that in multiple cases is utterly disgusting and vile, and in some cases the abusive calls and emails Council staff have received as a result have been referred to the police. This type of misinformation that is spread through some of these media outlets is bringing out the worst in people. It is clear that they prefer the word of one person rather than reading the Council papers and sourcing the fact. Again, one of the radio stations said we should be focusing more on the financial fixing of the organisation. They clearly hadn't noted. Yay! Well, I'm delighted to inform you, because you obviously don't know, that the Council has in fact recorded a surplus of some 47 million for the last financial year. So, yeah. Well, that's... So you can see we've done that. I'm also, please, can we have some quiet here and some respect? We showed respect when people are speaking. You guys can do the same, please. An example of this misinformation is some of the media reports have stated that council has banned the Australian flag. So, Mel, I want to ask you, is there any comment in the council's draft policy or guidelines which bans the flying Australian flag? And Mel, am I right in understanding that council is actually increasing the number of council assets which can display the Australian flags, specifically by installing new flagpole infrastructure in Umina Beach? Okay, please, hold your applause. Thank you for clarifying that, Mel. Again, it is very clear that council has never banned the Australian flag and in fact is ensuring it can fly appropriately and all on an increased number of council assets. I just want to read out a couple of the examples to show how far the mistruths went. These are some of the more polite emails, I'll put it that way. I'm just going to read out the appropriate words. It says, to ban the flying of the Australian flag on flagpoles, the abolishment of the Australian flag, believe you are against flying the Australian flag, the flying of the Australian flag will cause offence. None of those comments are in the paper. So how does the community at large understand that that was the message being conveyed? And as I said, I think the media have a lot to answer for. As a relatively new Australian myself, I take great exception to the allegations because I committed myself to upholding and obeying the laws of Australia, and I did it by affirmation. In relation to the infrastructure used to house banners along West Street in Umina, it is important to note those poles are owned by Ausgrid. Since no one can hear what you're saying because you're talking at once, it's irrelevant. Let me speak. Ausgrid's email to council staff, I don't think could have been more explicit, and I will reread it again. Ausgrid supports council's position that flags are not suitable attachments to Ausgrid assets and that it aligns with Ausgrid policies. So just listen to those words and understand that what the media have conveyed, what you have heard, is not correct. That's a different issue. However, you need to let us finish, please. However, on Friday last week, 2 days after the council papers were published, council received correspondence which the CEO pointed out to you. And as you heard, Ausgrid have changed their position since they provided their formal submission. I have to say, I am delighted by that. I am delighted by that. This now gives us a great opportunity to consider displaying flag banners on existing banner infrastructure, which I'm excited about, as it is an inclusive and community-driven outcome, something I've always wanted to see. As such, I'm going to be adding a couple of resolutions to ensure flag banners can be displayed on banner infrastructure, and that will be in accordance with the National Flag Protocol. So I'm now going to ask for those to be put up on the screen, and I will read them out. So, the extra recommendation number 7, that council endorse the opportunity for the Australian, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags to be displayed in equal proportions on existing banner infrastructure to acknowledge Australia Day upon application by local community groups in accordance with the National Flag Protocol. Resolution 8, the council authorise the CEO to make the necessary amendments to the street banner policy and the flying of flags policy to give effect to these resolutions of council. And with that, I'm going to pass the resolutions as shown on the screen, and I do look forward to seeing the flag banners on West Street, Umina in the future. Thank you. So we will now move to item 2.4, which is the Wombrel Beach Termination Protection Structure Engineering Design Requirements. And I'm going to ask Dr. Alice Howe, the Director of Planning and Environment, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. This report presents final engineering guidelines for terminal protection works and beach nourishment at Wombrel following public exhibition. Since significant erosion took place in the 1970s, there's been extensive research undertaken to determine the most feasible solution to address coastal hazards at Wombrel Beach. This work, which included the Gosford Beach's Coastal Zone Management Study in 2015, culminated in the Gosford Beach's Coastal Zone Management Plan, which was gazetted by the New South Wales Government in 2017, and determined that a seawall coupled with sand nourishment was the preferred solution. Since 2020, progress to implement the adopted actions in the Coastal Beaches CZMP has culminated in a detailed cost-benefit analysis of 5 seawall options. Community consultation has been undertaken throughout this process over many years, more particularly in late 2020, mid-21 and earlier this year. The engineering guidelines before Council for consideration tonight...
I can't have other people interrupting.
The engineering guidelines before Council for consideration tonight support a narrow seawall located as far landward as possible to maximise beach width and reduce the need for ongoing sand nourishment. The works are proposed to be located on private land wherever possible, with construction, ownership and maintenance the responsibility of those private landowners. Those private landowners at present, or the land that's not in the public beach zone, include council and include the Office of Strategic Lands, and it's our intention that all parties would contribute to that structure. It's intended that the guidelines will assist in the preparation and evaluation of development applications for this work on land outside of the active beach zone. The principles on which these proposed protection works are based are the location of the structure as far landward as possible, as I mentioned, Mr. Administrator, to maximise beach width, for the works to be located on private land wherever possible, and lastly, that the structure should blend into the coastal landscape. During the exhibition period, 247 submissions were received. Key issues raised included impacts to beach amenity, perceptions that alternative solutions had not been investigated, funding security for sand nourishment, and flexibility for seawall alignment. The guidelines have been amended in response to this feedback, in particular to include a 5th design principle focusing on a high-quality visual outcome for the structure. They also now include clarification of sand nourishment requirements, clarification around the development assessment process, and clarification of Council's role as a landowner. The report before Council tonight, in addition to recommending adoption of the guidelines, recommends an upper limit contribution of landowners towards the cost of future sand nourishment, commits Council to funding its fair share of protection works, and seeks a commitment from the Office of Strategic Lands to fund protection of New South Wales Government land. The report also recommends that Council advocate to the New South Wales Government for additional support to address coastal hazards that are affecting communities along the coast of New South Wales and in particular the Central Coast. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Ms. Howe. I do need to draw to people's attention the fact that the decision to have a seawall with sand nourishment was actually made by an elected council, being the former Gosford Council. That was made back in 2015. That's a matter for record. So it was, in that coastal zone management plan, it was seen as the preferred approach. And as I said, the decision was made by an elected body. What we are considering tonight is purely the design guidelines which go with enacting those decisions which have been made earlier. As it stands right now, any homeowner on Wombrel Beach can lodge a DA to protect their property. But at the moment, there are no desired guidelines. So you can get a complete mixture. And there are, in fact, a group there already attempting to do that. By having desired guidelines, we protect the public amenity. We determine how the seawall will look, and we determine who pays for it. If we don't do it, it exposes the community and council to developments which could be built outside important frameworks. And one of the things we cannot stop is somebody protecting their property. We can't stop it. And furthermore, council is obligated to remediate and carry out temporary repairs. And please, and that is something the council will not be in a position to continue to do. Access Economics, in their presentation in Canberra in the middle of the year to a packed group of about 700 council representatives from across Australia who fully endorsed these comments, said that unless climate change is going to go away, we're going to get... That's my point. And thank you for agreeing with me. So unless it goes away, councils are going to be faced with ever increasing problems. So I'm delighted to see that you are fully supportive of the idea that climate change is causing more and more problems. And what Access Economics say is that please, I've been respectful, please you be too. Sorry, this is a council thing. This is a meeting. A council meeting is a meeting in front of the public. It is not a participatory meeting other than that. But anyway, so it exposes... Unless it ceases, I'm just going to have to close the meeting down. And we will resume it, don't worry. So please be respectful. As I said, Access Economic have said the time interval between when these weather events occur is getting shorter and shorter, which means that the risks are increasing and getting more and more. Therefore, the cost to council and the community will grow. And we are not in a position to do that. Right now, 97% of the $38 billion that was spent across Australia in the 21-year to clean up weather events, including fire and flood, only 3% of that was spent on mitigation. So look at the vast amount of money just in 1 year. Access Economics forecast that by 2060, that will have risen to close to $90 billion. We cannot keep going the way we are. So, I just don't know what I've got to say to keep you guys just from actually listening. So if we're going to weather these storms, we have to reimagine from recovery to resilience. So the key recommendations in this report that I think Alice read out at the end, I can sympathise with a lot of the views. But we don't control that. The state and the Commonwealth, and believe you me, we tried, and the previous administrator, Dick Person, also tried to get the Commonwealth to come to the party. And that was to put far more in terms of sand nourishment. We cannot, as a council and a community, afford sand nourishment on the ongoing basis with an increased frequency of these events. So we are going to be writing We want and we need, as councils, and this is right across Australia, amendments to the Local Government Act to allow for the costs of construction works on private land identified in a certified coastal zone management plan or coastal management program to be able to be recouped through a coastal protection services charge or a similar mechanism. At this point in time, we cannot do that. So we also want a development of a New South Wales-wide approach to mass sand nourishment to support coastal councils to manage the impacts of coastal erosion on coastal communities and the coastal environment. And we want additional support for coastal councils to address the increasing risk of coastal erosion to which their communities are exposed. In this situation here, we can have residents doing their own thing. We will not get a satisfactory result, and it will look messy, and it will occupy more of the beach. By putting the design guidelines in place, you will get a uniformity, and you will also maximise, because it is on their land and they're paying for it, you will maximise the amenity of the beach. And this approach that I asked for, because it was a failure in the Coleroy Wall, and I do accept some criticism about that, particularly the fact that it doesn't look flash, but we got added in to this one here, that in terms of the DA process, the assessors, and no doubt will go to the planning panel eventually, will have to take into consideration what the wall looks like, the aesthetics and the materials that are used in the construction. So we have done our best to mitigate those and reduce the risk for the community. So with those comments, I am now going to agree and support the recommendations of the paper and pass those as a decision of council. Thank you. Happy to talk about to people afterwards if you want to come and have a cup of tea or coffee. Okay, we'll now move on. We now come back to resolve it. Please, we're now moving on to the rest of the agenda. We now move on to back to item 2.2, which is the Community Support Grants Program. I have looked at that. This is where the council is going to allocate approximately $17,000 of GST included from the Community Support Grant Program to Kincumber District Neighbourhood Centre Incorporated, to Vegan New South Wales Incorporated, to Tuggerah Lakes Christian Education Board Incorporated, to the Gudjajong Aboriginal Corporation and Deepwater Dragon Boat Club. So I will now move those recommendations as shown. Oh, and sorry, Tangerine Events, their application was not eligible. So with that, I will move those recommendations for those grants as shown on the screen. We now move to item 2.3, which is the Six Cities Region discussion paper. I'm now going to ask Dr. Alice Howe if she can make some comments about this particular Six Cities regional vision.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator, and I note the public forum that we received earlier and that the opportunity for submissions is still open until the 30th of October, and anyone who wants to make a further submission might like to do that through the Greater Cities Commission website. The Greater Cities Commission has recently released this discussion paper on the Six Cities, which stretches from the Lower Hunter to the Shoalhaven and is the largest and most productive urban region in Australia. The discussion paper outlines the Commission's approach to delivering global competitiveness and local livability. This broad vision for the Six Cities region is generally consistent with Council's adopted strategic priorities.
Please, can I have some quiet here and be respectful? No, look, if you should contribute. Can I just let's be very clear about a couple of things. The Six Cities is a bipartisan. Both Labor and Liberal have supported the concept, so they have. All I can suggest here is go and talk to your local politicians about it, because it is not controlled by council. It has been put out by the Six Cities team. It has not been put out by council. What we are doing is that paper that is here. If you look at our strategies for affordable housing, for economic development, for population growth. Our strategies have been consulted with the community and they are consistent with what these people... Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave very shortly because you're totally interrupting it. Other people are trying to listen. You may want to carry on, but please let other people listen. It's just totally unrespectful. I'm sorry. No, this is not a debate. So can we move on, please? So this is a report from council supporting it. Sorry, I'm going to have to rule this out of order, and I will close the meeting down. If it doesn't stop, I'll have to ask for a recession for 15 minutes while hopefully at the end of that we will have order restored. But we can't continue with a meeting with people behaving like yourself, constantly interrupting, and when other people are trying to hear and listen to it. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr Administrator, the report before you tonight recommends that Council write to the Greater Cities Commission expressing Council's general support for the Commission's vision, but providing Council's feedback on specific matters as outlined in the report before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. And as I said, most of this has been put out by the state government, and the 6 cities has bipartisan support when it went through the Parliament. So all I can say is that's a fact. Check the parliamentary records. So that isn't. This is not. This. Please, as I said, let's finish the paper. What we have done is we've provided our comments based on our strategies, which have been consulted with this community and have been reported, and a number of those actually predate way before administrators' time. They are a result of previously elected bodies for this region. So I'm now going to, with that, support the staff's recommendation and pass those recommendations as shown on the screen. So we now move on to item 2.5, I think it is. Yes, 2.5, the planning proposal for Macleay Avenue, Woy Woy. Dr. Howe again.
Thank you, Mr Administrator. This planning proposal is for 18 Macleay Avenue, Woy Woy. It seeks to rezone the site from RE1 private recreation to R1 general residential for the purpose of affordable housing. The report also seeks support for a planning agreement to dedicate the eastern part of the site to council for drainage purposes and to close 2 adjoining unused pathways and incorporate them into the land for affordable housing purposes. This rezoning is the last stage of the rezoning proposal, with changes to the land use zones to be made should council resolve to support the recommendation, Mr Administrator.
Thank you. I think this is a very worthwhile thing. We have so many people, every report you look at, every agency you go and talk to out there that is involved in these things, say the same thing. There is not enough housing. Please, could you refrain from speaking when I am speaking? This is a council meeting, and as I said, you can talk to me afterwards if you're welcome to. I will come out there and happy to. You cannot talk to me, you cannot participate. The council meeting rules do not allow that to take place. So, as I said, it is a very worthy recipient, proponent to this, Link Housing, very reputable and a very well-run organisation, and they do a very good job of looking after some of those people who cannot afford the type of housing that other people can afford here, and that does look after some of the lower well-off people in our community, particular people who come from domestic violence situations and so on. So I'm actually delighted that we're able to contribute more housing to those sort of people, because it is sadly needed and there is sadly nowhere near enough. So with that, I'm going to approve the adoption of those resolutions that are shown on the screen. No. Adoption of the Davistown item 2.6, Daviston and Empire Bay Floodplain Risk Management Study and Plan. Dr. Howe again.
Thank you, Mr Administrator. This report seeks a resolution of Council to adopt the Davistown and Empire Bay Floodplain Risk Management Study and Plan. The New South Wales Government has an established framework through its Floodplain Development Manual for councils to carry out floodplain management responsibilities. This process involves data collection to inform development of a flood study, which defines the nature and extent of flooding. That is then followed by a floodplain risk management study to identify the options to address flood risk, and finally a floodplain risk management plan, which identifies the preferred management actions. Following the adoption of these preferred options for management, the last stage is the process of implementing the adopted risk management actions. For Davistown and Empire Bay, the nature and extent of flooding was defined in 2010. Further work was done in 2015 to identify risk management options across Brisbane water, and in 2020 to investigate the options for adapting to the impacts of climate change. This work has informed the development of the current Davistown and Empire Bay Floodplain Risk Management Study and Plan. This draft study and plan were exhibited in February and March of last year. Just over 100 people attended drop-in sessions and 61 submissions were received. Amendments have been made to the final version of the document in response to that feedback to adjust the alignment of the proposed foreshore barrier at Davistown to include additional properties and to conduct further feasibility analysis around the specific location of a proposed drainage easement at Empire Bay. The management actions recommended for adoption include measures to address flooding from the catchment and from Brisbane water, such as drainage easements, foreshore barriers and seawall construction guidelines, as well as flood warning systems, flood awareness programs, and progressing the next stages of the local climate change adaptation planning process. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Ms Howe. And this is, again, issues that the Council is going to need to address. First for this one and the paper that is following, item 2.7, which is the Northern Lakes Floodplain Risk Management Study, which we'll come to in a moment. But for both of these papers, I can sort of talk to them as one, if you like. But the simple problem is that with sea level rising, I'm so pleased that you really, I'm so pleased you agree with me. With sea level rising, I think I'll just close it down, shall I? Yeah. Okay.
Then you hold it. Then you
close the meeting. I'm going to ask those people who wish to have a conversation to go outside and have it. If you can't do that, I am going to close the meeting down for 15 minutes. Are you going to go outside? There is no, I'm not sure where you understand the rules. Okay. I'm authorised pursuant to clause 14.14 and 14.13 to ask people to leave, and if they don't leave, I am now going to close the meeting down and we'll go into recess for 15 minutes. Thank you. can criticise me for it, but I'm not wasting time doing that. People can't behave. We'll now reconvene the meeting, and under the Code of Meeting Practice Section 12, I'm now going to move the remaining items 2.6 through to 2.11 and agree to the staff recommendations and move them en bloc. And that means we have now completed the council agenda, and I will now close the council meeting at 7:33 p.m. Thank you.
6 to 2.11.
2.6 to 2.11.
So that's all that matters?
Yep. I voted on them.